Before we begin, as usual, enter your body through surrender to your body, so that you can embody it. Letting go with exhalation. Hopefully, now you know how to breathe correctly, as in caved in belly breathing, complete exhalation. Which ends in the innermost center, in the solar plexus, emotional center. And then you let go into being, if you can, the absolute. So that you are fully rooted as much in reality as in yourself. Now, in this live stream is about giving an introduction to the recent, very recent, quite astonishing revelation, and frankly, extremely surprising revelation about the center of the soul, our primary identity, the core of our identity, which is the core of our me, which is the me itself, being located in amygdala. That subject it's not just about concluding it here in this way, that there is such a center of the soul in this place. This subject is extremely rich. There are so many implications. So I will just mention in this live stream a few things. And my plan is to go deeper in a more methodical way into the subject in the next week in the online retreat. If you remember, in the last live stream, I spoke about amygdala being representing our main, actually the master center of the emotional self. And all the rest that we experience emotionally in us is just its expression. So, initially this is what I wanted to call it, emotional self. But there is a problem here that it's not just an emotional self. It's multi-layered. It is also a center of intelligence. Well, primarily emotional intelligence, or initially emotional intelligence, but more than emotional intelligence. Capable of learning, allowing us to exist in this world, and evolving. But additionally, it's not only a center of intelligence, it's also a center of identity. This is why I had a hard time to actually find a name for that center. What to call it? You call it one way, you miss its other functions. Function. It's very difficult to find a name that encompasses that all of what that center is. So eventually I decided to call it simply me. And that's quite interesting, the journey into me. As you know, me is a concept very much present in this teaching. In fact, the first book written by us, me and Human, Enlightenment Beyond Traditions, almost 30 years ago, was actually about me. Because that was the main point of, Beyond Traditions, honoring the light of me, not just seeking impersonal enlightenment. It was enlightenment to me. So I've been teaching about me from different angles, also about the new centers of me that we have been awakening, like pure, different centers of pure me. Been teaching for so many years, but actually we have not discovered the main center of me. Because all these centers of me that we experience, including the person, actually manifestations of that me, which is at the center of everything, that me, which is in Amygdala. It was there first. All the other centers come second, and they belong to that me, even though it's not necessarily integrated and unified. The problem with me is that center of me, because it is so primary and it is truly the closest to who we are, it's completely intangible. Like you can objectify a person, even though it's not the right thing to do, but you can. But you cannot objectify me. So fundamental. One of the names I was coming with to call it was innate me, which is inborn me, me that we are born with. Because this is what it is. I've been thinking, as a teacher, I had to contemplate these things, how ordinary people know that they exist. There was never really a true answer found to that question because there were just different conjectures, such as, that each thought has a sense of me, for instance. So there's a sense of self, the sense of self in the body, so people know that they exist. But all of that is unsatisfactory. How people know that they exist, or rather, to say it more accurately, how do they know that that they are themselves? How do they know that they are themselves? Because they have a sense of me. But if you ask them, who are you? Where is that me? Of course, they cannot find any answer to that. They're just confused. Even though they already know that they have it. They just don't know how and what it is. And so they have a sense of me, even though their person is completely unconscious. They have no center in the mind. But there is a knowing of me. And that knowing of me is from Amygdala. That is where this knowing is coming from. But me is not conscious of itself. It's sort of irradiating or is giving us that sense of self, but while it is not conscious of in itself. Amygdala is completely unconscious. In fact, this is the area which is the most difficult to become conscious of, the most difficult to awaken. And how to do it, how to identify it, I will come to it. But before, I would like to somehow tie this talk to the talk, from the last Saturday, where we spoke of Amygdala as the emotional center, emotional self, rather, because there's one emotional self and there are, three emotional centers in the body: heart, solar plexus, and sacral center in the lower belly. But there's one emotional self. Emotional processing is one of the most important functions of amygdala. But amygdala is not processing emotions consciously in itself. It is experiencing emotions in two directions. One, through the body. Second, through the mind. But you never feel that amygdala actually is emotional in any way. If you don't feel any emotions in your mind, nothing tangible, but you feel sort of emotional, It means you experience emotions in the body. And it happens in this way, because amygdala is the bridge between your consciousness or your mind and the body. Whatever is being experienced or processed, identified in the unconscious of the amygdala, that information is being transferred to hypothalamus, from hypothalamus to pituitary gland, and from pituitary gland, hormones are being secreted into the body, and suddenly you feel that rush, emotional rush in your body. And it's happening all the time. Meaning, suddenly something is more intense, but there's always something happening. So when you experience something in your body emotionally, you don't know really where it is coming from. And it is coming from amygdala. Our emotional existence before the development of the mind, and also afterwards, is primarily defined through the body. In the body, we have two types of autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic. And in these two systems, this is why you experience not just your emotional existence, but your existence, which is fundamentally emotional, but not always in a way that you experience particular emotions. That's what I mean. Parasympathetic system is about rest and digest response. It is the system connected to the preconscious biological intelligence of the body, which takes care of all its basic natural functions without our intervention. And the sympathetic system is about will, mobilization of energy and action. While the parasympathetic system is fundamentally unconscious, sympathetic system is linked to consciousness. This is where you begin to feel and experience and identify your emotions. So amygdala, which is itself unconscious, becomes conscious through us experiencing emotions in the body. You feel nervousness in your solar plexus. Already something happened in your amygdala that triggered that emotion. So amygdala is conscious of itself in your solar plexus through these emotions. You feel love in your heart. It is a love coming from amygdala. Amygdala is often referred to as center of fear, which is incorrect. It is center of fear because thought to be because it is a center responsible for our survival, which in fact means its own survival. And fear often accompanies the the threat of survival, to our survival. That's why human beings experience so much fear. So there's a lot of fear in amygdala, but it's not a center of fear, it is a center of our emotional existence, center of any emotion, including love, including joy, including even a sense of humor. It's also there. There's no other experience in you. You can say that the person is feeling this or feeling that, but he is not. Person is a mental center of the mind. If he feels anything, it's because amygdala feels through the person or me. I do not like to use this term amygdala too much because it makes it too clinical, too anatomical. Just me. Me is feeling emotion in the person. Because similar as the amygdala is feeling itself in the body, so it is feeling itself in the mind. And here's an interesting situation. Our evolution from amygdala, the mind has developed. Well, I wouldn't say the person has developed because most people do not have a center of a person, but most of you do. And the mind is relatively conscious, and amygdala is unconscious. So amygdala is conscious in the mind, but is unconscious in itself. That's I would call a paradox. So there's a split, division. Which, of course, one of our evolutionary challenges is to dissolve that split and to unify me with the mind and mind with me. So the mind represents our rational part that is trying to make sense from things, trying to control reality somehow. This was the main purpose of the mind. To make our survival even more efficient. So the mind became theoretically rational, developed, it's supposed to be rational, but amygdala is irrational because amygdala due to being unconscious, her evolution was not smooth and her development was not smooth, and it just has too many fears, too many emotional issues. And these issues goes into your body. Like you may think that you need healing in your body because, your heart is hurting, your solar plexus is hurting, or your whole body is hurting. But you need healing in amygdala. Of course, going into your body, surrender to the body, is in fact healing amygdala. Which is, we don't have time here to go into it too much, but that is true too. But there's such a thing as going directly to amygdala itself. So there's a healing of amygdala, healing of me through the body, and healing of me in that emotional center of me, which is located in amygdala. Similar with the mind, you might think that you are having irrational thoughts, disturbing thoughts. Your thoughts make you mad, insane, crazy. You cannot control your thoughts. You think too much. Negative thoughts, you think too much. One of the reasons people think so much because their thoughts are just not only because they cannot stop thinking technically because they do not have consciousness, but also because it's overloaded. Their thoughts are overloaded with emotions, negative emotions linked to fears, obsessive tendencies, and they just cannot stop. But it is not the thoughts that are obsessive. Amygdala is obsessive. Amygdala is crazy, and it's, it has craziness, it has insanity in itself. Everybody has it to some extent, and that goes into the mind. So you think your mind needs healing, you need to change your thoughts. No, you need to change your me, which is in amygdala. You need to change you need to go into the emotional center in the amygdala. This is where the change happens. So we don't really see the source of where it is all happening, and that's quite something. We don't see the source of our emotions, what actually triggers them, where they come from. We don't see the source of the mind. We don't see the source of anything because we are not aware of me. And that's when you think of it, it's quite shocking how lost one can be, and the fact that in spite of all our knowledge and in our teaching we have reached the most sublime understanding, not of this planet, and yet still being unaware of the source in us. I'm not saying source is God, but the source in us, the main center from the master center from which everything is happening. It's okay if you are confused. It's because me, that center of me in amygdala is really intangible. In the past, I used to say the person is the blind spot in consciousness, but actually me, that innate me in amygdala is the blind spot in consciousness. And I will show you how to recognize it. But first I need to explain to you why me cannot recognize itself initially. And it's nobody's fault. Me simply has no chance. No chance to recognize itself. Because it's not endowed initially with the faculty to recognize itself. Because there's no consciousness in amygdala. It's purely, there is a certain intrinsic sense of self that we, in overall way, experiences me, but that sense of self simply cannot become conscious of itself in itself and in that particular location, in that particular center. No chance. a long way is required for me to develop all these faculties through which it can become conscious of itself. First, consciousness has to develop. And the first level of the development in consciousness is in the mind. This is the general, the basic consciousness human beings experience is in the mind. Having some kind of a semblance of conscious thinking is consciousness. But that consciousness in the mind, as you know, is very fragmented, and it does not have yet any spiritual cannot help us really in spiritual awakening, other than just, inspire our thoughts towards spiritual search and so forth. So the next step, which is more rare among humans, very rare, super rare, is awakening of the person, which simply means that the mind creates a center. This is what person is, the mind, the center of the mind. The first center of pure subjectivity in the person. So it's a big thing, in fact. But the person alone also cannot be conscious of me. No way. How can he be conscious of me? Person is conscious of himself, and he can be conscious of thoughts. He can be conscious of what is happening in his mind, and he can be conscious of can identify different psychological or emotional states. He can be also conscious of what is happening in the body from a distance, as he does. The reason he can be conscious of the body, because the experience in the body, emotional, is tangible. You feel it energetically, and you feel actual. There's an emotional experience. You experience it in your body, so the person, through the nervous system, the person can be conscious of it. But in amygdala, there's no sensations. There are no identifiable emotions. Because whatever amygdala is doing, it's not experiencing it in itself, it's experiencing it either through the body or is experiencing it through the mind, while remaining sweetly oblivious of itself. That's why the person cannot be conscious in that way, that there is something there that is my source, that gave actually rise to me, cannot recognize it. The person thinks he is the main center. He is the source of himself, awakened to himself by becoming conscious of its identity behind thoughts. So you see, awakening of the person does not mean that you still cannot identify me. To the next step, you need to actually enter your headspace with consciousness which is the awakening of emanation consciousness. And emanation consciousness awakens through emanating intelligence that comes from the person and spreads and enters our body, including the head. And here's the interesting thing. We have awakened this emanation consciousness. All the head is filled with space of consciousness, space of pure subjectivity. But we are still not aware of me. And the reason is that the space of consciousness is not discriminating between anything in the headspace. It's just filling all the headspace with light. And it goes through me, but it cannot identify me. Which, from the high perspective means me cannot identify itself, because that emanation consciousness is also manifestation of me. Me that is seeking, expanding, but still being unaware of itself. So there is a time where the same emanating intelligence which gave rise to emanation consciousness has to recognize me, which means the me has to recognize itself through that intelligence. And that is something quite extraordinary. What makes it happen? Because without having this information, you see, you need an information to inspire your search. Otherwise, it's all vague. There's no details in your space. There's no, it's all blurry. It's all abstract. It's all in very, very low resolution you experience yourself. You need to have a detail. You need to have information. And how that information comes to you, in your case, it's simple. It comes from me. But generally speaking, how it's supposed to come, it's also difficult to capture. I would say it is that a manifestation of self-remembrance, a term that we have been using so much that almost too much. It's kind of like when you use terms too much, they lose their potency. So we need to. So when I use the word self-remembrance, imagine that we use it for the first time. Forget about these other self-remembrances, which are also self-remembrances, certainly, but that is like the greatest one, greatest self-remembrance. That's what it is. Remembering me is the greatest self-remembrance. Eventually this me has to remember itself. Because you see, there's nobody else to remember that me. It's not the mind remembers me, person remembers me, intelligence remembers me, heart feels me. No. They cannot do it because they are all expressions of me. Me has to remember itself. Another information which you might find interesting is that me, which is in the location of whom corresponds to amygdala, is also the seer. You remember that infamous seer that we have been dealing with? Disturbing seer because creates concentration behind your eyes and so forth. That seer is actually me, among other things. He is also the one who hears, but looking at him as the seer makes it more tangible because we are very visual. So you may ask, okay, so why I experience seer behind my eyes? Why that center of amygdala is deeper in the headspace? The reason is that me, the seer, is identified with mental concentration behind the eyes, because the act of visual perception is also connected to the mind, and through focusing on things, we develop the concentration that is eventually experienced as tension, and me, who is the seer, forgets, does not know that he is a seer. He's just seeing, but he is, it or she is experiencing itself in that junction of energy behind the eyes, where we develop mental concentration. So you think that the seer is behind your eyes. The seer is behind your eyes, but not just behind your eyes. And as you know, many people experience seer in the eyes. They cannot even separate who is looking from the eyes. It's all, moves forward. But the truth here is deeper. He just doesn't know himself. Even to say he has forgotten himself is not correct, because he never remembered himself. Just born, like in innate me is inherently, is originally unconscious. Only becomes conscious, hopefully, in this incarnation. Location-wise, amygdala is behind the frontal lobe. There's a temporal lobe in the middle of it. Behind your eyes, in a straight line, the middle, where your eyes, the line through your eyes crosses your temples, slightly above your ears. somewhere middle, in the middle there. It's not middle of the brain, but it is deep in the brain. This where is me. And we will be exploring that. But now I would like to, before we depart, I'd like to give you a very simple exercise. So you will know what I'm talking about. If you simply relax in your head, okay? Just look at me without focus. And forget the person. Forget the person. Because if you remember the person, like in a way that is way too much identified, basically with the, the center of the person. So when you look at me, you will feel that you are the person. Because you are identified with the center. So do not identify with anything. That's my point. Because whatever you identified with, even your heart, you will feel like the heart is looking. I want you to be so natural, like close to being simply spaced out. And when you put yourself in the spaced out state, there's no particular center, there's no focus, you're just sort of there. I'm here, you're looking. And now in that moment, bring a little bit, tiny amount of focus, not visual focus, just somehow focus, somehow just become more aware of your existence, in particular your head. Who are you? Who is looking at me? Forget everything that you have learned. Unlearn everything that you have learned. Just for the sake of this exercise. And just tell me who is looking. Who are you? How do you know that you exist? There's no concept. There's you don't use the word consciousness. You don't use the word person. Nothing. You just feel in the most direct way your existence. And feel like the 0 point of your existence, like that very center of your existence, from which everything is initiated. And you can clearly, if you're sensitive and relaxed and not obsessive, just let it be, let this knowledge come to you. You can clearly recognize that center of me is not in the front of your head. It's somewhere deeper. And it is the one that is looking, among other things. And it's also the one who is feeling. Because that one is you. It is your true self, and it is your soul. That is your soul. All the rest of you are different dimensions of the soul, but that is the master center of your soul. It is the Godhead of your soul. And remember, it's not just about catching it, about, making sure you know what it is, that you have captured it. It's about, above all, I would like you to get in touch with the fact that you don't know, and with the fact that it is so elusive. This is so subtle. You actually need to deeply relax. You cannot catch it because it's not outside of you. And it's not even inside of you. It is you. So there's the point of great return of you to you. That is the greatest self-remembrance. And I would like you to contemplate these things before the coming retreat. Because awakening of me, which this is what it is, or this is what it is becoming, this what is happening, will change everything. Om Namah Shivaya.